What did I learn from that? I learned that most people are confused about finance because everything they learn came from bankers who speak in three-letter acronyms and assume everyone's following their advanced thinking. And the success that I created from being on stage and talking about finance, mortgages, retirement, buying property, building portfolios was that I don't come from a banking background. I have a strong academic background, but not banking. And so I explain things in human speak, not bank speak. And that was the success, and that I've followed through to my career as a professional speaker now, that I don't assume any level of knowledge for the audience. And I think that was the most important uh, aspect of being on stage talking about these things, was that I suddenly brought it down to human terms. And so what I learned from there was to never assume that people have a level of knowledge, and actually would start off by saying, okay, if those of you who are advanced on your journey just relax and don't bug your neighbors while I explain this but to them, and then we'll all be on the same page. And by being that, a lot of people, when they stand up and present, they think they have to be word perfect. Well, no one knows what you're going to say, so it doesn't matter. Okay, no one's got the script before you, and it's okay to be human and say to the audience, some of you will know this and some of you won't. So those who know it, just sit down, relax, send text on your phone while I'm explaining it to the others. And that personable approach is what I do now on stage, where I only talk about finance 10 times a year, and most of the time I'm talking about business, leadership, culture, strategy. So
It's
that's my main
interesting.
learning.
It's interesting using that common language, because when I've traveled around the world and I've been to many events, I feel that the speakers bring too much energy. You got to jump up and down. You got to clap your hands. You got to high five. And I feel exhausted just being in the audience. I also find that they use words to make themselves look intelligent. But as they use those three-letter words and those acronyms, it makes me feel stupid, because I think, have I missed something? Do I have to go back to the start? And oftentimes I have a feeling of incompletion because I'm trying to figure out what those words actually mean. And
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
quite
And
confusing.
that's the problem. I mean, so in my speaking, I talk about business, and yes, I do jump around the stage, but not quite getting everyone to sing in a circle, singing
But
Kumbaya.
do you
That's
yell at people like these
no,
speakers today?
no,
It's like every
not my
motivational speaker
style.
has to scream.
It's not my style. I do use all the right speaker training that I've had over the last 30 plus years, different voice pitches, different pitch, different speed, different volume. And I move around, but I move around for quite a specific reason. There's a famous speaker out of America called Michael Grinder who talks about nonverbal communication. And Michael taught me some amazing techniques. So if I was telling you a story, if I was telling my audience a story about Daniel and I having a conversation, I would, go like this and on the one side, step to one side and say, I asked Daniel the following question, and then turn my body to this side and say, and Daniel said to me, or and Daniel said. Now, in the audience's mind, even though it was me moving places, they have anchored me in one place and Daniel in another place. And so the story becomes much more real. We're talking about finance and a journey of buying property, the same idea, but on a different level. So I would start with my audience. So traditionally in the Western world, we move from left to right. In the Middle East, we move from right to left in terms of reading. So I would start on my right, which is the audience's left, looking at me, and say, right, for those of you starting your journey, this is where you start. This is how you start the investing journey. Then I would move to the middle of the stage, different person, now talking about that part of the journey where your properties grow and you're building equity. And the last part of the journey would be, this is how you build your retirement based on those properties. And so, yeah, it's a very much a different style. I'm not a motivational speaker. I don't, I will motivate teams and create inspiration and optimism, but through solid techniques of business and team building and leadership.
You've sold $1 billion of mortgages from stage. How long would it take to sell $1 billion worth of mortgages if you were doing one-to-one appointments?
Well, I still do. I still do one-to-one appointments. So that's about 20 years that it's taken. I mean, it's a long time frame because I would stand up and talk about retirement planning, buying property, all these different aspects, depending on what the workshop was about. And people would come up to me afterwards, book appointments, and come in and see me, or I'd meet up with them the next week, 2, 3 after that presentation. Um, Today, obviously, we have some sophisticated or relatively unsophisticated tools like Calendly and TidyCal and these things, where now when I do a workshop, I put up a QR code and say, go there and book an appointment. Whereas previously they'd come up to me and I'd have their phone and we'd spend 10 minutes trying to find the right time. So our systems have got better in terms of doing it, but absolutely. The one of the keys, I have a great back office team, and I know we discussed that before we started about how you leverage, how you grow from a solopreneur to a business. I have a great team that I've built up over the last 17 years. So I'm happy to be the front man. When I've done a workshop, they want to see me, the clients. So I'm happy to have the 1 hour with them, whether it's face to face or on Zoom or Teams, doesn't matter. And then I send a summary email to the client saying, great conversation. This is what we discussed. And then my staff take over. My staff are CC'd in that. They take over all the paperwork. Occasionally, they'll come to me and go, the client doesn't understand something. Can you have a conversation with them? Fine. But over the years, I've leveraged myself out of that back office paperwork position into a much more strategic role, where I spend my life doing strategies for clients, and then my staff take over. And they hate it when I handle the paper now. Okay. I was good at paperwork 20 years ago. I've probably not. I'm more strategic now. And so that's part of that journey to building a business, of giving up that control.
Your life hasn't always been on stage. You spent a significant portion of your life underground, 6,000 feet underground in the gold mines. How did that change you as an individual?
It changed me because I was 21 years of age and ended up with 5,500 staff over a Christmas period when the other 3 engineers decided I was the most junior and they'd leave me in charge. I don't know if that was a clever move or not, but that's the jury's out on that. What it taught me a lot about leadership. It taught me a lot about being a leader, and a great example, although it sounds egotistical, and I have to paraphrase that. The staff there, the were predominantly black staff working on the mines underground. The staff used to call me Makosi. And what does Makosi mean in the vernacular? It means little boss. Now I'm 5'6", so I kind of understood it on a very superficial level, that it meant because I was short. But truly, when I actually started asking the staff what it meant, they said it's actually a term of endearment for someone who they actually look up to as a leader, as opposed to followed because they were the boss. And so it was an interesting lesson at age 21 and 22 of my life that I had this inherent idea of just being kind to people, creating an environment where people wanted to work with me and be around me. And then when I asked them to do something, it wasn't a stress because it was an ask, not a tell. And so that was the main lesson. I mean, yes, I learned lots of stuff about engineering and the dangers of working 6,000 foot underground in a gold mine. But what I learned that stood me in good stead as a leadership person over these years, and I still relate stories from those days on stage today. Nothing to do with selling mortgages. I talk about leadership, culture, and strategy. And a lot of those lessons stemmed way back then working for Anglo American.
Mm. Being underground and working with a significantly large team, and you're having different opinions and different thoughts on culture, how has that transformed your mindset? Because when I first became a leader with Emirates Airline, I was trained really well, but we were 40,000 feet above the ground. And the dynamics were also very different to being underground. What were some of those things that you've really taken away?
I actually moved to so I spent time underground, and then I spent time on a diamond mine, about 4 hours out of Johannesburg. It was all the same employer, um, and the interesting incident happened the first time I flew on their corporate jets. So I'm 22 years of age, driving an old Toyota Corolla. I rock up at the corporate hangar. You didn't go through public airports; you went to the private hangar. And the first flight I ever took was on a Citation, which was pretty cool. A lot of the other times were King Airs, which aren't so cool, but they're still pretty nice, right? Anyway, I get to the airport, to this private terminal, park my car, and I notice, and I'm in jeans and an open neck shirt because I'm going to a mine site. I'm in boots. And then I notice all these guys being delivered to the terminal by their chauffeurs in fancy suits and, highly polished Italian shoes kind of thing. And I went, okay. Got on the plane and I went right to the back seat because I was the most junior, clearly, and not a suit. Anyway, the plane took off to 40,000 feet, as you say, and the pilot put his head out of the cockpit and said, "You can move around now." And on the floor next to me, right in the back, because it was a single seat at the back, right next to me on the floor was a cooler. I don't know what you call it in the US. In Australia, we call it an esky. In South Africa, we call it a cooler bag, an ice chest, an ice box. And so I opened the ice box and I stood up and I was about to serve drinks to other people in the plane. Now, just to explain, the culture of this organization was incredibly hierarchically structured. I was at the time a C4 level engineer, which meant that I parked in the third parking lot away from the office. If I was a D1 level engineer, I would have parked in the second parking lot. And that's how I ate in the C level canteen, not the D level canteen. That's just how siloed this organization was. Back to 40,000 feet, I get a tap on the shoulder. Now, thankfully, it wasn't the hand of God. It was the hand of the most senior director on the plane, who said to me, "Please don't do that. Within our planes, the most senior person has to serve the drinks, not the most junior." Now, when you relate that to an organization of, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of employees, that was so hierarchical, that was the moment at age 22 where Anglo American changed my view of culture. Because I thought if they can create this upside down culture within their planes, there is a future for upside down cultures, for cultures at work, for teams that work through an asking, not a telling kind of environment. And that moment changed my whole future of how I viewed culture and organizations.
I wish my boss served me. I was blessed when I first started real estate, and before I got the job, my employers made me jump a series of hoops. And so I came in for an interview, and they asked me, what I saw for myself as a future in real estate. And when I left the interview, they gave me a book, and it was The Richest Man in Babylon. And the leader said, "Go and read this book." And he didn't offer me a job. And I came back a couple of weeks later and he said, "How was the book? What did you learn?" And I told him all the things I learned. And he said, "Beautiful. Here's another book." And it was called Who Moved My Cheese? And he said, "Go away and read this book." And I read the book and I reported back. He said, "Did you like that?" And I said, "Yeah, that was a really good one." He said, "Now go read this book." And it was called Real Estate Mistakes. And he was making me jump through these hoops. And what I realized was he was checking on my desire levels. Did I just want a job? Did I just want a paycheck? Or did I actually want to create a career for myself? And was I willing to invest in it? And from the start of that career to the final day, they had always led, and they were very much that servant leadership style, always checking in. What can I do for you? How can I make your life better? And I felt that my commitment to the company was incredibly high because I felt that they were equally, if not more, committed to me.
Yeah,
It was a
absolutely. And
fascinating culture.
that's a culture I've created in all my businesses. My business in South Africa, they were listed on the stock exchange. Business here, the mortgage business, done over 3 billion in mortgages. But my partner and I at the time, 17 years ago, made a strategic decision. And again, we were talking about that before we started recording about how you go from that solopreneur. So a bit of the history of the financial services business. I was a solopreneur. My ex-business partner from South Africa moved to Perth and contacted me and said, why don't we grow your business? Okay, I said, sure, let's try. So I had, been in the industry a couple of years already. He joined me. We put some money in. We employed a lot of brokers. So in the real estate space, salespeople. Okay, but we didn't build a back office capability because at that stage I didn't have any back office support. I'd been writing all my own loans and literally standing at the fax machine on a Sunday afternoon and faxing the paperwork through to the bank and then phoning them on Monday to check they'd received my fax because that's how unreliable they were at the time. And we then got 18 brokers working for us, and we found that they were, and we didn't recruit bankers, by the way. We recruited young graduates from university who preferably had a finance degree so they could talk to people about finance but weren't steeped in banking terminology. So they understood, they could look at someone's financials and understand them adequately, but didn't think like a banker. That reason worked reasonably well. About 9 of those dropped out. They never made it. It's a tough industry in the first couple of years. But the turning point was 17 years ago where I employed my first assistant. And I came up with the principle in my life of give up control to gain control. And there's a whole chapter in my book called Give Up Control to Gain Control. And that chapter in the book basically says you have to actually gain control of what you do well. What was I doing well? You asked me earlier about how do you write $1 billion from stage. Well, I write $1 billion because I'm leveraging my best time, which is doing strategy for people, and then getting my team to write the loans. And that idea of giving up control was saying, how do I generate more revenue at $500 an hour, or whatever the number is? And how do I delegate the $10 an hour tasks to my staff? And that mindset, that philosophical mindset is what grew the business. It grew the business to, in some years we settled over 400 million in loans.
And now you're at beyond
And we've
3
done 3
billion in
billion.
loans.
3 billion, yeah. So, but in our peak years, so before the GFC or just around the GFC, we were probably sitting on about 380 to 400 million a year for 2 years. Then the GFC hit, interest rates went up, property prices went through the floor, and so business slowed down. But interestingly, throughout all that, the other cultural aspect is I've never actually laid off a staff member during that entire period. So, I managed to keep everyone going and everyone on staff, all my support staff on side. Some of them have moved on from being support staff to actually being brokers in their own right now. Some have left voluntarily. They left on their own accord.
I like the way you put it.
Yeah, they left on their own. No, they left. They wanted to move on, and I've never held in a gun to anyone's head. I've never said, I'm going to be upset with you if you leave. And in fact, today, the day we are recording, I had a partner in another business, and I've sold out of that subsequently. But the right-hand person in that business has subsequently left that business and gone out on her own. But she has a good relationship with my team and myself, and she wanted to come and hang out here for a few days with her new assistant, so her new assistant could understand how she works and how our team works to better. Now, got no financial interest in her business, but we have a relationship built up over years of mutual respect in the industry. And so I have no problem if people join my team and leave and they want to pursue their own things, hang out their own shingle. I'm still going to have a beer with them or a glass of wine when I see them at the next social function.
What's your take on leadership? Is it about leaders building more leaders, or is it about gaining more followers? What do you think is important? Are both important?
I think leadership, and this is one of the programs that I run at the moment, it's about co-creating change in organizations. The truest leaders empower their team members to make small changes, and if each team member makes small changes, small tweaks, we get big change and we get movement in the organization. So that's one of my takes on leadership, is that is that leaders empower team members. Unfortunately, people do get promoted to a level of incompetence. There was a book many years ago that called the Peter Principle, and in that book, he said that people get promoted to a level of incompetence, and we do see that in the corporates. A great engineer gets promoted to engineering manager, and just wants to be an engineer and can't give up that detail, that diving down into the detail box all the time, and doesn't have the skills. And so a lot of the time, corporates don't actually train that person adequately to be a leader. I think that's the other challenge. I mean, I do believe that leadership is an inherent skill. You can teach it, but not everyone actually wants to be a leader. There is a desire that you have to be a leader. I think, and at times you have to be able to be a chameleon. You have to be able to communicate with people in the way that they want to be communicated with, because that's the most efficient way. If you keep talking in the same manner to everybody, you'll lose, 75% of the people, because you're not communicating with them in a way that they want to be communicated with. So
Mm.
the leadership is like an onion. I don't believe you can go on a week's leadership course and become a leader. Okay, it doesn't work that way. I think I think leadership is something that people identified in me who were very uneducated and simply skilled. They saw a trait in me years ago, and I think there's probably lots of research to be done on what are those traits. They saw it in me at age 21. Um, when I look around at the teams, and I'm on three not for profit boards, and the contribution you make. I think leaders are also happy to contribute, to give back to society, to be a part of charity. It doesn't have to be charity; it can just be society. Leaders are aware politically of what's going on around them, maybe not politically involved. There's a distinction. Um, yes, you do have to, as a leader, be able to have the hard word and have the hard conversation. And unfortunately, there was the book called Radical Candor, written a few years ago by, I've forgotten now who wrote it. Radical Candor talks about the four types of leaders. And it's a great book for anyone looking to go to become a leader, to understand leadership. The concepts in the book are quite amazing, because radical candor is the highest level of leadership. That is, you can actually be straight down the line with people, but from a position of caring. Because you often get leaders who are straight down the line with people, but actually don't care. And and to use just those two dimensions on this model, that is called ruinous empathy. Okay, you know, where you just being nasty for the sake of being nasty, almost. And so there are four dimensions to that model, which to me, the first time I saw it, I went, wow, I actually understand so much more depth on leadership now.